manage the project?
Oh, no.
What do you want to be when you grow up? What sort of people are happy doing?
Oh, good question.
Calm goes the leader and so goes the pack.
Nice.
Ultimately, everything is your problem. You are the buck stops with you. And if your heart says yes, then it's a very rewarding and fulfilling career, and grab it with both hands and go for it. All right, so Lauren, today's serious question.
Okay, I'm prepared.
Project manager, to be or not to be?
Oh, bit of Shakespeare to start off the podcast. Nice bit of culture there.
It's a question that you think a lot of people ask when they are at university, construction management graduates and students. But I think it's a question that doesn't get asked often enough, because it's just a default setting now, isn't it? Everyone wants to be a project manager.
It certainly seems that way when I speak to people that are still doing their degree. That seems to be where they're all pretty much planning on heading.
If you ask 100 graduates, what do you want to be when you grow up? 97 of them or more are going to say, I want to be a project manager. But the interesting thing is that I find when you ask them, why do you want to be a project manager? They don't really have a good answer. And if you ask them, okay, well, so what does a project manager do? They very often start to shift around in their chair very uncomfortably. And if you just let that silence hang in the air a little bit, you get some interesting responses like, manage the project.
Oh, no.
And that's okay. Like, you know, it's how are you supposed to know these things when you're not when you haven't done them yet? But I think it's a worthwhile question to ask when you are intent to join the commercial construction industry. It's a worthwhile question to ask: should I be a project manager or should I pursue the project management path, rather than just assume that that's the default pathway or that's the only pathway, because it certainly is not.
That's a good question to keep asking then.
Yeah. So what we want to do today is to delve into the life of a project manager, really, and talk about the good, the bad and the ugly, and to give people a bit of an insight as to what perhaps the less obvious challenges are. And I want to focus on it in two ways. Who would be good? What are the attributes of a project manager, or what makes a person a good project manager that goes beyond just the skills that you learn at university? Because I think there are some inherent attributes as an individual that makes you a good leader and a good project manager. And then perhaps the more important question is, what sort of people are happy doing it?
Oh, good question, because you can be so unhappy doing something that you're good at.
Yeah, I think, and I think there's people out there that do the job and do it well, but just hate life.
Oh. Is it worth it?
And I think, and I don't want to paint this job or this industry with a bad brush. If I make that statement, there are people that are great at their job. There are people that love the job, and I think most people out there that do it and are good at it love it. But there is a percentage of people out there that is sort of find themselves doing it and not enjoying it. And I think if you can have if we can shed a bit of light and awareness on the topic, perhaps we can prevent some people finding themselves in that situation down the track.
Bit of a public service then.
Well, let's see what we can do. So let's talk about the challenges, the main challenges of a project manager. What keeps them up at night? So I think let's start with the most obvious one, and then perhaps with the least obvious one. So the most obvious one is that the task loading is very high when you step into that role. Your phone never stops ringing. Everyone comes to you. You know, I spoke to someone yesterday and he said, you know, whenever your phone rings or you get an email, there's a problem. People come to you with most things that you get presented to as a problem to solve. So the task loading is quite high, and therefore you have to be very organised. So you to be good at it and to not create a whole lot of stress for yourself, I think you just have to naturally have and develop that ability to be highly organized and be quite dedicated to your administration and to your documentation, especially in today's world.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I remember I was speaking to someone, I think it was last week, about their role as a project manager, and he described it as playing chess in 3D. So I'm imagining this almost unplayable game where the pieces can all move in different directions and it's so hard to keep track of. So yeah, organisation, got to be high on your list. And I guess that willingness to carry it into your personal hours as well, because CAs and PMs typically work in the office a 5-day week, but I talk to lots of PMs that say on that Saturday that site is open, and who do they ring when there's a problem?
Well, that's one thing that one of the project managers pointed out when I spoke to them last week, is that when you're a CA, the pressures are high and there's lots to do. But he found the fundamental difference was when he transitioned into PM is that it didn't stop. Like he said, as a CA, and then this is, every organisation and project is probably a little bit different, but he said for him, when he was a CA, his phone wouldn't ring much on the weekend and it wouldn't ring much at night after hours, or when he was on holiday, when he stepped into that role, that it wasn't stopped. It never stops. Because effectively, when you're a project manager, you're like a mini CEO of your own company. So let's say you're running 2 projects, one's $25 million and one is $10 million. You're running a $35 million business. If you're a project manager running a $100 million project, you are running a $100 million business. You are responsible for the budget and everything. The buck stops with you. So, so that's and then the pressures that come with that when you're stepping from the CA to the project management role is that you now have ownership of that and therefore the responsibility of that. So if anything goes wrong, it comes back to you.
Yeah. So even on Saturday, when you just want to take out some time with your family for a barbecue or chill out, that phone can be ringing.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've got to be highly organised to be able to deal with a lot of variables and different tasks and different things happening at any given time. So that's quite obvious. I think most people would expect that.
Yeah.
So let's then talk about some of the most less obvious things. And I think when you step for most people, when they step into that role, that's the first time they really become a people manager. Not always, but more often than not, is the first time they become a people manager. And now you're putting a whole lot more variability into the equation, right? So when you're a CA, there's already a lot of variables. So you've got all your subcontractors and all the pricing and all of the things that go into a project. And now you just add a whole nother layer of variability, because now you've got your own team that you need to motivate. You need to keep in line, but you need to spin all the plates with your own, not just externally, but also now internally.
I think we've talked a lot, even in the last few episodes, about communication as being such a valuable tool for a CA or a PC or anyone in construction. I think when you're running your own team, you go next level with that. So not only do you need to have all of those positive relationships that we've talked about and have them with different types of people, with clients and with your CAs and with your subbies and all of these people that require different types of communication styles and skills. But all of a sudden, when you're a people manager, you have to be willing to have the difficult conversation. And that takes a huge emotional toll, and I think that's where a lot of people can be unprepared for leadership. Leadership seems like this kind of sexy, high-powered thing where you can, put out all of your ideas and make the magic happen, and it's all because of you. But at the same time, when something goes wrong, it's all because of you too, and you've got to deal with why it happened.
Yeah, and I think if you want to be really good at it, you've got to develop that ability to be able to have the difficult conversations, or deliver the bad news or whatever it might be. But you've got to tailor each one of those conversations depending to who you're talking to. You might have two different people in your team that have got two different personalities, and if you want to get the best out of it, you got to communicate with them in different ways often. And one of the PMs I spoke to last week made the point, and he said, what he didn't realise when he came into the job is that you play the role of psychologist more often than not. Because you've got so many different people with different personalities. So you've got your site manager, you've got your cadet and your graduate and your team. You've got your CAs with all different personalities. You've got your subcontractors, and you've got your clients and consultants. Everyone's got a different motivation. Like, sure, at the end of the day, everyone is supposed to pull in the same direction to get the project done, but each one has got their own style and their own unique motivation. So he gave me an example of a particular day where the site manager was pissed off about something that happened on the site, and he was quite a character that can be quite confrontational and wouldn't say aggressive, but site managers are often quite hard because they've learned how to run sites. And I think you've got your old school site managers that like to stamp their fists on the desk and sort of my way or the highway, which is probably not the norm anymore. I don't think that works anymore, but I digress. He had a difficult site manager to deal with, and then he had a cadet that was demotivated and had to be sort of given a shoulder to not to cry on, but a bit of a pick me up. And then he had a client that he had to negotiate a variation with that was a prickly situation. So in one day or in the space of 2 hours, you can have different conversations at different levels with different people, and that takes a lot of skill and time and awareness to develop that skill to be able to do that effectively. Because if you do it, if you don't have the awareness to do it effectively, you're not going to get the best outcomes out of people.
That's right.
And you're going to make your own job harder.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So psychology, you need to become a psychologist sometimes. You need to have real high levels of communication. And I think the conversations in recent times have been a lot about subcontractors. The industry have gone through a lot of pain. There's been a lot of builders have gone bankrupt, a lot of subcontractors have gone bankrupt, and there's been a lot of negativity and pain in the industry. And I think we are transitioning from this sort of environment there where people we use the term smashing subbies. And again, one of the PMs I spoke to recently, I asked him the question, what was the biggest learning curve for you, or what is the thing that you needed to learn that you didn't think was, or that was going to be different to prior when he came into the role. And he said, it's that ability to build the relationships with everyone in the life cycle of projects, and especially the subbies. There are project managers out there that'll take a hard line on a project and it'll work for them on that one particular project, and they might get away with it and get a good outcome on a spreadsheet. But then on the next project, it might be a shortage of a particular subcontractor, and that subcontractor will say, well, who's the project manager on that job? And if they mention the person's name, they go, there's easier ways to make money, mate. I'm not working with that bloke again. Or we see project managers want to go from one builder to the next. The builders will always ask the subbies, well, have you worked with this bloke before? Do you know him? And if the subbies go, it wouldn't work for them again, then the company will often not offer that person a job because they're just going to make their life difficult. So sometimes the hardline approach works in the short term, but in the long term it doesn't work. And that's becoming more and more, as the industry is growing and developing and changing, that communication with the subcontractor is becoming more and more important.
So interesting. So it's a level of scrutiny that I think people aren't necessarily prepared for, because the higher up you are and the more of a leader you are, the more people talk about you. and the more they judge your efforts. So you have to be conscious of it in terms of your communication with everyone, and also you have to be ready for it. You have to be aware of it. Everything you do is going to be watched and reported on, and conversation will be about it. It's a little bit like being famous, I suppose.
Yeah, I think there's some similarities.
Figure of interest.
You think Taylor Swift has those problems?
Taylor Swift definitely has all of those problems.
I'll ask Izzy, my 10-year-old daughter. She knows all about Taylor Swift. So then next thing is, and I think this now we're really coming to the nuts and bolts of it and the meat and potatoes perhaps, and this maybe crosses over into not just being good at it, but being able to be fulfilled and content with it in a way that you're actually going to enjoy the job and thrive in it. Because if you hate it, you're not going to thrive in it. And this is this ability to deal with the stress and the pressure and so whether you soak it up or whatever you do, but to be able to remain calm under pressure and to be able to still function in your personal life in a positive way when you've got a whole lot of stress and pressure on your shoulders. And I think that's something that is probably a personality trait, that some people are just naturally calm, and other people are naturally frantic, and I think those people that are sort of frantic by nature, they probably have the most difficult time in adapting to the role, because they probably have to work harder at it to either change their outlook or I don't know, is it a skill, would you say?
Well, look, I think it's a little bit of both. I think we certainly have personalities that are, some people get stressed quite easily, some people motivate themselves by stressing a little bit, and that's how they sort of get their gears winding. But I think you would have to learn, with so many of those chess pieces in play, to slow down and to calm down, because that's so important as a role model of how to deal with problems.
One of the PMs I spoke to, he asked one of his mentors, who's a managing director of a big company, and he's asked him the question at a function once, what makes a good project manager? And he said calm. What did he say? He said, calm goes the leader and so goes the pack.
Nice.
Because when it's all kicking off, your team looks up to you, and if you're stressed and frantic, then your team will become stressed and frantic, and then you're in trouble.
So you really, again, it comes back to that role modelling. If you set the tone for how to deal with problems, then everybody follows in the same suit. So you have to reflect how you want your team to be.
So there's probably two ways of dealing with that in terms of how you relate to your team, and that's one is just try and hide it and bottle it all up and be like really stressed and frantic on the inside, and not let your team see it. And then there's probably the way where you're just naturally calm. The reality for most people is probably somewhere in the middle. I think if you're on that extreme end of the spectrum where you're just like falling apart on the inside and trying to put on a brave face in front of your team, you're going to use so much of your own energy. And I think this is kind of the topic of conversation I've had with most of the people I've spoken with and asked a question in the last week, is some people get to that space where they can kind of detach from it, whether you detach from the stress or separate themselves from the stress. And someone spoke about, he used the word drama. He said if you have the ability to not get sucked into the drama of it all, then you will save a lot of energy, you will have a happier work life, and you'll be able to be more effective and efficient in what you do. But that's obviously much easier said than done. I was going to say, it
sounds like good advice for life as well as for construction.
I think if you're a good project manager that can remain calm under pressure, then you probably be pretty good at most things in life.
So you learn some of these things come with experience. I know I've learned every time I've stepped into a new role, and the first time you have a particular challenge and you're not quite sure how to solve it and it feels like a really big deal, then the next time it's much easier because you've done that before, So some of it comes with time, but I think a lot of it comes with self-awareness and self-reflection as well.
Yeah, so I mean, look, we can use some interesting words that sounds like psychological jargon, but you can talk about having emotional flexibility. I always remember a saying that one of my mentors said to me years ago that I always think about. He says, flexible trees don't snap in storms. Like if you think about a palm tree, they don't often snap because they have flexibility. So you have to have that sort of flexible, emotional flexibility, not get sucked into the drama, deal with problems efficiently and effectively, but don't make everyone's problems yours. And I think it's very difficult as a project manager, because ultimately everything is your problem. The buck stops with you. So how do you then kind of decide what you're going to take on and what you're not going to take on? But for me, this point is really important, because I think this is the question that you need to ask yourself as a human being and a person early on. Like, do I see myself being able to live that life and be able to develop the skill set? And even if I can develop the skill set to cope with all of that, am I going to be able to live the rest of the other part of my life happily and not take all of it with me? So, take it all so personally. And I think if some people go, I can detach myself from that. And there's probably other people, this point, there's probably some other professions that has to ask the same question, like paramedics.
Yes.
People that deal with high pressure situations.
Police.
Police, or social workers, or people that deal in situations where there's a lot of pressure, where if they internalize everything and take it all on their own shoulders and all make it all personal and cross that line, then the rest of their life becomes incredibly difficult. And how many times have we heard people talk about their in construction, their family life falling apart, and people get divorces and all of this sort of stuff. So some people feel quite negatively about the industry because they feel like the industry have taken their personal life and they've got divorced and all of this sort of stuff, and that's not good for anyone. Now, is it the industry's fault? Is it the individual's not fault? But could they have dealt with it better? And I think that comes down to the willingness to want to do it, and the personality and the skill set that you, and the awareness that you can bring with it. So that's a very important question, I think, to ask. So then I think if we then move on and we ask, if you consider all of this, and you have to ask yourself the question then, well, why do you want to do it?
Always a good question.
So why do people on the face of it want to be a project manager? Because it seems it's a goal for many people, because it's that sort of first pinnacle role. It's the first sort of, if you've come through university and you've spent your time as a project coordinator and a contract administrator, and you get the promotion to project manager, then there's this sense of achievement, like I've made it, I've done it, I'm good enough, I can do it. But if you're chasing the role for the title and the pay packet, and you haven't considered all the other stuff, then I think you might be in a bit of strife. I think you might set yourself up for a difficult life, a difficult career, if that's the only things that you're focusing on. I think, and then if we talk about decisions that are made with you, if I want to get a little bit airy-fairy with you, let's talk about heart and mind decisions.
Okay.
Like if you make a decision with your, just on a logical basis of saying, well, I've spent the time and money doing my construction management degree, I'm going into this industry because it pays well, and I'm ambitious, and I want to get to the top, so therefore I'm going to be a project manager, without considering any other stuff that we've just spoken to. So all you're looking at is a title and a paycheck. Then you're making a decision with your mind. And I think if your heart pulls in a different direction, or your heart might not want to deal with all of the other stuff that we've spoken with, which there's nothing wrong with, then you're just going to have to white knuckle it until you retire.
It's going to feel very much like work then, isn't it? It's going to be hard work.
And I can speak from personal experience because I did it once, and I learned a very expensive lesson. Like about 12 years ago, I worked in a business, and I didn't have a leadership role. I had a business development focused role, and then the state manager resigned, and then all of a sudden I found myself in a position where people are coming to me and go, "Why don't you go for the role?" And I never really thought about it, but people in my personal life, my family around me, as well as the people in the business, said, "Well, it makes sense. Why wouldn't you do it? It's you got a title and a pay packet." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And then I then applied for the role, asked for the role, and then I got it. But I knew in my heart of hearts at that time that I shouldn't have done it because I didn't really want to do the job. I wasn't ready for it, and it wasn't something that resonated with me, and I didn't want to do it. And the end result was I know that I didn't do a great job of it because I didn't have the right skill set. I didn't really want to do it, and I wasn't ready for it. And I did myself a big disservice, and I did the people around me a big disservice. But the point I'm making is that wasn't my goal. Yeah. It wasn't something I wanted. It was something other people thought I should want.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a goal that was connected to me personally. And I fear that a lot of people out there want to chase a project management role because that's what you're supposed to do. It's what the industry, if you want to be good at it, you should be a project manager. That's what everyone does. That's where the money is, and that's where people also mistakenly think that's the only way to get to the top, which is not the case. We'll talk about some alternatives in a moment. So I think you ask yourself, well, why do you want to do something? Sometimes it's just in you. You just know you want to do it. And then coming back to some of my own examples, there's many things. It's like, I don't know, even this podcast. We really enjoy doing this. We love it. Whether one person listens to it or whether it's just my mum and your mum listening to it or whether 100 people listening to it. I think this is our third episode, and I think what did they say? That other podcast, I said 90% or 80%.
Yeah, he said 90% of podcasts don't get past episode 3. So we're now in the top 10% of podcasts the minute that we put this up.
There you go, top 10 of global podcasts. And then other examples for me is I like to go bike packing, which is basically you put like hiking equipment, camping equipment on a bicycle and then go and ride it. And I've done some big rides. We did the Hunt 1000 a couple of years ago where you ride from Melbourne to Canberra through the high country, which is 26,000 meters of elevation, and I think the longest day was 18 hours and the shortest day was 12 hours. And then you go through rain and snow and everything else, and then but why when people say, well, why do you do it? You must just like the challenge of it. And it's like, I don't really have a good answer. I just love it, and it just makes my heart sing whenever I think about doing stuff like that. And I've spoken to other people as well, and coming back to project management, like I said to this PM that I spoke with a couple of weeks ago, and he was talking about how difficult it is and how his phone rings on a Saturday and everything else. And I said, so why do you do it? And he said, it's funny he asked that question. He said, if it was just for the money, his perception was, I wouldn't do it for money. He said, look, I know that I can go and be a CA somewhere, even in the business he's working for or in the bigger tiers, go be a CA and earn the same money or more. He said, but I do it because I love it. As hard as it is and as difficult as it is, I just it gets me up in the morning, and I love it. And I think often when you ask people why you love something, you can't really put words around it. Like if you ask me, why do you like putting yourself through all the pain and agony to go and ride, a bike for 18 hours and then end up sleeping in a tiny tent in the bush in the middle of nowhere and drinking river water and cooking pasta and river water? I don't know. I can't give you a good answer. I just love it. And I think if you want to play an extreme sport like project management, In the real sense, for a commercial builder, I think there's got to be a draw card that goes just beyond just the title and money. Otherwise, you're just going to be able to hack it. Because if you think about being a PM, let's say you finish university, and then you go through. In my humble opinion, you should spend at least 5 years before you can be a PM. Most people 6 and 7 from the time you graduate to the time you become a project manager. So for the graduates that listen out there to this, when you call me and you ask me and I ask you what job do you want, please don't say project manager, because you're probably 5 to 7 years away from it at that point. But then, so most people are in their late 20s at the earliest when they become a project manager. If you're going to retire when you're 60, most people will do most of the biggest chunk of your career in commercial construction is probably going to be a PM, and then maybe a senior PM, and then from there it's like construction manager and director, and so you're going to spend probably a minimum of 10, 15, 20, some people 30 years as a PM. So if you're going to white knuckle it and hate it for the title and the pay packet, you're going to be in for a rough ride. Yeah,
look, I agree. There's nothing wrong with being ambitious. There's nothing wrong with, I think, wanting to move further up, wanting to show what you can do, wanting to test yourself. But I think if you do it without passion and enthusiasm and love for what you're doing, then it just becomes work. Yeah.
The other thing that's worth mentioning before we close off is the golden handcuffs piece that some people find themselves in, and I see this happen all the time. Like people the people that do it for the wrong reasons or kind of, like I say, white knuckle it, they get to this point where they're earning 220, 230 grand a year, but now their lifestyle requires them to earn that pay. So they've got a mortgage, they've got kids in private school, they've got all these things happening. And then they come to the realization that this is just, the toll is too high. And then it's what else are they going to do to earn that money? So they're going to have to, there's alternatives. So they can go and do, might have to go and run their own business, start their own building company. But that's a whole different ballgame. Now you've got to take all the risk, and sure, you can get maybe a bit more flexibility here and there, but that's a whole different kettle of fish. But some people want to transition to client side or consulting, but then the pay drop is often quite dramatic.
Yeah, when you're at that level, absolutely.
And then they can't pay their mortgage anymore. So now they just have to keep doing it and then you keep doing it for the kids, and you keep doing it for your house and everything else, and you're kind of locked into it. Other people tend to often work in small businesses, and then they can get promoted pretty quickly. So you work in a small business that the projects are less than $1 million, and all of a sudden you're 25 years old, and now you're a project manager, and when you're 28 you're earning 150 grand and you're a project manager, and you decide that you kind of hit the ceiling, you want to go and work for a bigger commercial builder, and they go, well, hang on a second, but you're not a project manager, and you don't know, here's 10 things that you don't know, that you haven't developed your skill set in. And those people then end up fighting with their ego and their wallet, because they have to relinquish the title.
Yep.
And the pay, sometimes the pay drop is too much. So I think it's worthwhile considering if you're working in a certain organisation with a certain setup, how does that translate into a bigger environment, or what are your options if you wanted to go into a different environment? But, within that small organisation, that could be fine. You could end up working there for your whole career. You can end up becoming a general manager in that space, or you can also end up being starting your own one and doing your own small fit outs or whatever. And that's a great career and a great way to be. But, we had an example because recently where we had a guy that we ended up placing in a commercial business. He's been a project manager for 2 years, but he's gone in as a junior CA. Yeah, he had to take a title of a junior CA, and I think the pay was about 10-15 grand less. Yeah. But now he's got so much more headroom
He does.
But he was able to take the pay cut and not worry about the title so much. But other people can't let go of the title and then they're stuck. So it's worthwhile asking those questions. Alternatives, there are many different career alternatives to project management. Some people just stay being a CA, senior CA, and then that transitions into commercial manager or contracts manager. There's the estimating pathway, and then there's the site management pathway as well, which we'll probably do a video on. But I think we're seeing more and more people transition away from just builders, just the traditional pathway is carpenter, leading hand foreman or supervisor, and then site manager, where now we're seeing builders putting together like graduate programs for some people coming out of university that wants to follow a site management pathway that's also got its pros and cons when you compare it to being a project manager. So there's all of that as well. So all in all, there, if we go back to the initial question, project manager, to be or not to be, I think ask yourself the question, get awareness of what it's going to take, what are the skill sets, and what are the things that you're going to have to be able to work with and be happy while you're doing it. And if you can do it, and if your heart says yes, then it's a very rewarding and fulfilling career, and grab it with both hands and go for it. And if not, maybe look at some alternatives.
The only other thing I would reinforce is to keep asking yourself the question, because what's right for you at the start of your career may not be right for you 5, 10, 15 years down the track. So keep reflecting, keep asking the question, and don't be afraid to step backwards or forwards or sideways, as I've certainly done in my career, to do what's right at the time.
Yeah, I think have some good goals, have some clear goals, but there's a saying that says have your goals but hold them lightly, because they can change, and as you grow and develop as a professional and as a person, you gain more awareness, and then things might change. So don't hold on too tight. Thanks.